Hey everybody, this is your brother, Narada, Michael Walden. Welcome to All In, my podcast where we break down music, life, and love, interviews, and conversations. Let's get into it. Preston Glass, the great composer, producer, writer, musician, singer. I've been with you, gosh, man, I heard about you coming out of Seattle with Tom Bell, the genius.
Yeah.
You were like a little kid in his ranks. And then you went on to do all these fantastic things, working with me on with Whitney Houston's and everything that you've done, Aretha, Pointer Sisters, Miss You Like Crazy, Natalie Cole.
I know, it's
Teddy,
fine ball.
Teddy Pendergrass. I mean, so much. I just want you to just tell me anything you want to tell me at this time that you feel we need to know.
Well, if you're a songwriter out there, I learned a lot from this guy about songwriting, Narada, because he said just write good songs because they will be recorded. They can be recorded by anybody. And in my career, my experience, that has ended up happening. A lot of times I will write a song with someone in mind. It ends up being someone else recording it, but it ends up being a hit. Mm-hmm. The song he mentioned, Miss You Like Crazy, was originally written for Whitney Houston, but I believe it was turned in, and Clive Davis said, we got all the ballads we need. So it kind of sat there, and then it ended up in the hands of Michael Masser, who not only had produced Whitney, but he produced Natalie Cole, and she ended up doing the song. Same song, but different artists, hit. Mm-hmm. That happened with me with Love is a Contact Sport, which Whitney Houston ended up doing and you produced. That was written, believe it or not, for Patti LaBelle. I don't know if you knew this.
No, I don't think I did.
But I think you were getting ready to do something with Patti.
Yes.
And she had a hit that was on Beverly Hills Cop, Stir It Up.
Yeah.
Had that beat.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to come up with something that beat. Love it. I wrote that for her, but then I guess something happened where we needed songs to present for Whitney quicker. Mm-hmm. So that ended up being for her, and there you go. One last little example of that. I wrote a song it was supposed to be for Sheena Easton. And because I think you were getting ready to do some stuff for her,
yes.
So
yes.
I wrote a song called We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off. Wow. That was for her. But then I guess you got the project for Jermaine Stewart, and he was looking for a hit. So now that's two genders, male, female. But I think I changed one line in there. For Sheena, I wrote, Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Mm-hmm. And then when it wasn't for her, I changed it to quick hit. That's your game. Mm-hmm. So I guess the lesson is just write great songs. It might not end up being for who you targeted it for, yes. But at least target it, and then it could be a hit for somebody else.
Right. You mentioned Teddy Pendergrass a moment ago.
Oh, that was such a beautiful session.
He's a power. And the reason I mentioned Teddy Pendergrass this time also is because this whole soul movement, I feel, is going to come back. I'm seeing some kids coming up on the TikToks, whatever, who are singing Johnny Taylor-esque, Teddy Pendergrass-esque, where they're like, even that guy doing the Marvin Gaye vibe, the October,
right.
They're trying to bring it back.
Great.
So there's a surge of trying to come back a bit.
Yeah, I love it because people like a Teddy or like a Marvin, they keep the bar high because in today's music, maybe the bar isn't that high, but when these young kids realize the kind of quality of that music, they can bring that back, I was fortunate to work with Teddy on, I think it was the last project he ever did before he passed away. It was just one song. But, in fact, we did a remake of a classic song, and he brought his 94-year-old mother to the studio that day. It had been the first time he ever had been recording in, like 15 years. So his mom came to the studio all dressed up in purple hat, like she was going to church. And I said, when's the last time Mom came to the studio? Teddy said, she's never been to the studio. This is the first time. So in all those years, it was such an honor that she came to our session, and I met her, and he was telling me that the first time he ever sang was at church, 3 years old. So he wanted to bring his grandson to the studio as well, which he did that day, and we were able to stick him on a part on the breakdown, and age 3, same as he was starting out. So that was an honor. And I remember there were some young kids in the next studio, Questlove and the Roots. They happened to be in the, what was the name of that studio? The studio that Larry Gold had in Philly. And they asked, could we meet Teddy, Mr. Glass, could we meet? And we said, sure. So I guess that was a big honor for them, because Teddy, like you said, to the youngsters is like a giant, So those are things I look back on with pride.
Let me ask you, what was Teddy like in the wheelchair? What was he like as a person, as far as singing and everything? Anything you want to say about him?
It was almost, to me, like he didn't have an ailment or a deficiency. I had never met him before that, but I was around a few people that had been with him, and they said, well, you wouldn't want to work with him. Maybe it made him more humble, I don't know.
See.
But he was looking to me for guidance. Every few seconds, he would, not few seconds, but every few lines, and then he said, Preston, can you come out here to the control? He wanted me right next to him to kind of show him, instead of just the talk back. So we got a pretty cool little relationship going. In fact, before he passed, I was close to getting him a new recording deal, but he passed away.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Well, my heart's touched that you tell that kind of story, because, again, Teddy Pendergrass, people of that time were so sincere with their power. They changed music. And it's only now, I think, we're really realizing how much they brought to it, that we're realizing it was a golden age.
It sure was.
It was a golden age, man.
And we had, I don't know, my thoughts are, when you're saying that, it wasn't like one person here with that power and then a lot of people copying that same sound. There were like 50 people with different kinds of power.
Yes.
All different. Marvin Gaye, Barry White.
Yes.
What kind of voice is that? But
Exactly.
very successful. Phyllis Hyman. People that have great voices, but they didn't sound like nobody else.
Yeah.
Bobby
Womack.
Ooh.
See, speak about him. Anything you want to say about Bobby Womack?
I've never met Bobby. I know people that worked with him. Being a musician, you have a lot of friends that work with people, and I know I was just a fan of his music. But you hear stories, you're going, wow, that guy, he did that?
Yes.
But I just hear that music, and I'm like, that is sincere. He's just like, it's coming from his soul right there. Bobby Womack, you talk about him, I think about Sam Cooke going back further.
Yes.
And the stuff, the further you go back, especially when you're talking about black artists, the stuff they had to go through, and they didn't, that, if anything, made them even more determined or more powerful to let their light shine, It wasn't like a hindrance.
Yeah.
But the more you go back and see all the David Ruffin, the stuff that all these singers had to go through, these days maybe they wouldn't have to go through. So we're spoiled in a sense. Musically, we're spoiled because now you don't even need to play an instrument to make a song. Back then you had to learn your craft. Even way back then, you had to read music. What's that? You ask certain young people, what is read music? You had ABC? No, that's not reading music. I had a person come over to my house one time, and they were playing guitar, and she was like, do you like that song? I said, well, it's good lyrics, but you need to change the chords. And she said, well, I use only the best chords from Guitar Center. I said, no, not that kind of chord. The chords you're playing. She goes, that's what that's called? She didn't know what a chord was. But when you look at it, it's maybe not her fault, because maybe she wasn't educated like we were in our day. We knew that stuff, and we took for granted that we knew that stuff.
Right. I was in a podcast recently where I was mentioning, writing these songs like for Mariah, I Don't Want to Cry. And they said, well, how do you just write that in one day kind of thing? So you don't understand. My generation, you guys, me and you, we learned from Burt Bacharach. Holland Ocean Holland. great writers. Stevie Wonder as a little kid. They were great writers. You couldn't just come up and bullshit.
That's right.
Those
were our competition.
Tom Bell. You had to go for it. Right. Really put it down and be not compete with them, but do something that would be worthy.
Yeah. Well,
of being in the top 10 number one.
It isn't until now.
Lord, I'm trying to say it right.
Maybe years later. I know I'm standing in front of you, but it isn't until now I really realized, wow, that's an honor to have someone like a Tom Bell or like yourself or, Michael Mass or whatever, recognize that you can even be in the same room with them creating music because their intelligence level on music is so high. But we had to be that way in order to even get through the door.
That's right.
Yeah. But
see, people don't know that.
Yeah, no.
That's why I'm talking to you. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah, you had. And it wasn't a thing like, I'm bad. Right? It was almost a thing like, it's like it's a job interview, okay? We're going to apply for a job over here. You want to make sure your song is the best. I always say you want to eliminate the no. Like, don't let them hear what you got and say, nah, not quite. You want everything, your music, your lyrics, your vocal performance, your musicianship, the production. That's why my demos were not just, there's nothing wrong with a guitar demo or a piano demo, especially if that's the genre. But I went for the more fuller productions. So instead of just doing a guitar demo, I made my productions or my demos with all even if it was on pots and pans, whatever, I had it all there laid out. So, okay. Mm-hmm. So people could say, oh, okay.
That's a beautiful point. Rod Temperton was famous for that. The great writer from Michael Jackson, Heat Wave.
Great.
He was famous for, he wasn't a great keyboard player, but he'd make those demos fastidious. Every little thing would have its purpose.
Yeah.
He'd want you to make sure you heard going into making that record.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't, like me. I'm not a great singer at all. And Rod Temperton, I know by hearing those demos, he was not a singer. But that shows you how great those songs were. I mean, when you hear those hooks, the lyrics involved, he had all the arrangements, the bass lines, the background vocals. So, in fact, that's a guy I never met, but that's a guy I always tailored because he was one of the few, and you mentioned another person I admire, Stevie Wonder, that could write both music and lyrics great. A lot of people, like Elton John, maybe he can write great music, but, there's Bernie Taupin there. Burt Bacharach had Hal David. Oh, yes. But Rod Temperton he could do it all.
And the guy you worked with, Jerry Goffin, was working with Carole King.
Yeah. Jerry Goffin, wow, that was amazing to be able to co-write Miss You Like Crazy with him, but what's funny is, you can collaborate with someone without being in the same room. And that's what happened with Jerry Goffin. Me and Michael Masser had the music all laid out, the melody laid out, and I had the title, but we wanted to fill in the blanks with the lyrics, and his relationship was with Jerry Goffin. He said, you mind if we get Jerry involved on? So Jerry wrote the lyrics, finished it, Natalie recorded it. It went to number one on the R&B charts. And then, so we got a BMI award. I remember going up on stage, and I shook Jerry's hand. I said, congratulations. By the way, nice to meet you. So we co-wrote a song, but I had never met him. Mm-hmm. But then after that, we did some work together. But yeah, that was really a inspiring thing to be writing with someone that had written so many hits before. And Michael Masser as well. But, when you're working with these people, even though you're growing up listening to their music, when you're working with them, it's a different story. Like when I was working with Johnny Mathis, I'm sitting here at the board. That's one of the few times I got real, kind of awestruck, but I didn't show it because my job was to deliver to the record company a great song, what they wanted. Even though in my mind I'm like, what do they want me for? This guy is the greatest voice, But later I found out, because he was asking, I'd say, try that now with a little more soulful, ad-lib kind of part. And he did it, and he goes, "Is that okay?" You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, Johnny Mathis is asking me, "Is that okay?" But he's sincerely looking for my youthful direction. And then the record company, you know, is depending on. They're paying me to turn in the right project. So I'll never forget, went backstage at one of Johnny's concerts after the project I did, and he had people around him, and me and my wife Gina, we were invited to come backstage, and I saw all these people around. I was like, that's too many people. Let's just go. And then Johnny recognized me. Hey, Preston, come on up.
That's right.
And he had Johnny Carson and all these people that I only seen on TV.
That's
and he's like, I just want to ask you, did I do all right? You know, did I do your song?
Yeah, he's extremely beautiful.
Yeah.
So humble and kind.
Yeah. Great.
And
guy.
genius.
Oh, yeah. And a track star, too. From the
high jump star.
Yeah.
You met your wife at the record plant, Sausalito, and Gina, is related to the Larry Graham family. So the Sly Stone history is right next to you because of all that world, which is inspiring to Prince and a whole other generation now coming up. So let's speak about Larry Graham. Let's speak about your wife. Let's speak about anything in that world, how that's come into your existence and how that influenced Prince and his love of the funk, but also Larry kind of put a light on with Prince to kind of go, make sure you keep your integrity, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You know what I mean?
We could do a whole podcast on that. But what comes to mind, okay, first of all, you're the one that introduced me to Larry because you were producing a project. Before you had Tarpon, we did some stuff at, what was that, record plant.
And
Sausalito. And Automat. And then, so that's how we met Larry. That's how I met my wife. She was coming to the studio to visit Tina, who's married to Larry. And then, you know, we've become family for the last 40 years. And then, fortunately, I've worked with Larry more so. And he's just such a phenomenal musician. But I also learned that there's a whole legacy of people that love him for the funk. You know, he invented pop slap, and of course Prince being one of them. And I'll never forget, this is probably something you don't know, I was asked by a record label, Chrysalis, to produce Prince's sister, Tyka Nelson, 4 songs. So at that time, I was doing a lot of little writing with Larry. I said, Larry, why don't you co-produce a couple songs with me on this girl named Tyka Nelson? By the way, that's Prince's sister. And I don't think Larry was too familiar with Prince at the time, but we did it. And I'll never forget, and I was a big fan of Prince the whole time, you know, so I was always wondering, what would Prince think of this music that we did on his sister? Right. And his sister wasn't funky. It was more Anita Baker-ish kind of stuff.
Oh, I see, okay.
So we did the songs, and Tyka's, I asked her, your brother hear this? He goes, yeah. He was shocked that I got Larry Graham on a couple cuts. And he's like, how did you get that? You ain't even funky. That's what Prince said. And so that was kind of funny to me. But and then years later, of course, they did meet up and made some great music and, you know, brought the funk back. And it's just amazing how things go, you know.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Sly Stone, say something.
A big influence. My first 45 I ever bought was Everyday People. I'll never forget that yellow label, Epic Records. But yeah, I was 9 years old. I think I was 9. Yeah, I was 9 years old. But so that's how much his music influenced me. But, you know, everything you personalize. So I always looked up at who wrote that song. So I remember my dad told me, well, the person that writes the songs is in the parentheses and said S. Stewart. I didn't know who S. Stewart was. I have only heard of Sly Stone, but then I found out later Sly Stone was Sylvester Stewart. So I always admired the fact that he wrote all that Sly and the Family Stone stuff. And so I'm just happy to see, like, the Sly Lives documentary just came out.
You like to speak about, you enjoyed the documentary?
I enjoyed the documentary because it really focused on the positive impact he had on music in general, the masses, not just one genre of music, one race of people, but everybody, even women, men and women, black, white. But being, a Bay Area component person, I was proud of, that, the Oakland connection here, the Bay Area connection, San Francisco. So I thought it was well done by Questlove and his folks.
I'll put you on the spot. Name me, as you sit here, your favorite song as you sit here. What's the first thing that comes to your mind and your spirit?
Wow. See.
Come on. And
I might have to edit this out.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is I'm going to write a song called As I Sit Here.
Okay.
See, I can't help but get away I can't get away from writing songs. You just gave me a great idea, As I Sit Here. But, okay. Great. But let me go back to your question. I got a few, but I don't know what's going on comes to mind. Bet You By Golly Wow, that one of my mentors wrote. There's a lot of great songs out there. There's no way to...
I know.
Yeah.
I just want to see, just as you sit here, what comes to your spirit.
Yeah.
Do you know What's Going On is probably Otis Williams' favorite and Smokey Robinson's favorite?
Yeah, I heard that from Smokey. Yeah. He said that was his favorite album as well.
Yeah, and Otis told me recently, he said, on an interview, he said, I knew something was going on very heavy because I would go by in my car, drive by Motown in Detroit, and there would be cars and a lot of activity at night. He said it was very unusual. Wow. It was more of a daytime company.
Yeah.
But at night, Marvin would be in there cutting.
Oh,
at night. So he knew something very different. Special was going on.
Interesting.
Just because of the night.
I never knew that. Yeah. I do know it was somebody asked me. I was on a podcast last week, and they said, "Socially conscious music. Who is your favorite socially conscious artist? Is it Marvin Gaye?" I said, I would not call Marvin Gaye a socially conscious artist as far as his career. I mean, when you look at all his music up until What's Going On, let's get it on, baby, baby. Then it was boom, What's Going On, Mercy, Mercy Me, Right On, What's Happening, Brother. Right after that, Sexual Healing, back to them, hey, baby, let's get it on. So that was just a one-time thing, but it was so powerful to him because of what his brother went through in Vietnam and all that. He had to speak about it, he had to sing about it, and that was his way of doing it. It was such it was like beyond him. It was kind of placed upon his shoulders to put this music out. But it never happened before in his career. It never happened after. That's how special that album was, Right.
And for the great genius Smokey Robinson to say that's his favorite album of all time, that's very, very heavy, man.
I mean, you know how many albums come out? There are millions of albums.
Yes.
That one.
Yes.
And yeah, it's one of my favorite songs. But I think I remember because of the time period when I was growing up, I think it was like 10 or 11. And so it was my formative years, not only as a man, but as a songwriter. It was either going to be that as a career or something else. I think that showed me, wow, you don't have to write a song always about I love you, baby, or come on back, baby. Or it can be about what's going on. So that really taught me that, hey, you can write songs about life. And that, of course, is what hip-hop is about and a lot of great just music.
What do you think of Kendrick Lamar and that movement of music?
I love the fact that he's doing what he wants. I love the fact that, he's got a little Bay Area connection here. So, I don't get into the political thing and all that, but I think that's one of the most talented cats out there. Ain't no doubt about that. So, I'm like, right on, brother. Go on. And especially the creativity it takes to do not only lyrically but musically but visually, and then after all that's said and done, to say something that will move people's lives, that's powerful.
Patty Austin was here a few weeks back and said that she felt, I asked her, do you feel we love music the way we used to? And she was very candid to say no, that since MTV came on the scene, it changed. She said that we used to look at the album jackets, listen to the album, was being an experience listen to the album, look at the credits, study. Once the MTV took hold, we're listening more with our eyes and not as much with the albums, not as much as on the inside of it, more just like visual, video. That was her take, that we don't really feel the music or love it as deeply as we used to. What's your take about that?
Yeah, I saw that podcast.
You did see it.
And I agree 100% with that. And we're from the kind of same generation, but even more so, like, on top of that, like this generation is very, for lack of a better word, spoiled, because we get everything handed to us as far as the music. You know, I spoke to a young person a few days ago, and they're like, "You used to pay for music? You mean you guys used to pay for it?" They're like, that's a concept they never thought of.
Used to buy an album, used to buy a single, used to buy
they have a subscription, maybe
a CD or a cassette.
What's that? You know,
I see.
Okay, so that, of course, I would save my money, you know, my little bitty money, and get 2 albums a month, and I was like, get my little ABC Jackson 5 or what was it, Fifth Dimension Portrait. Yes. I remember buying that album. I was like, 9 years old? Mm-hmm. But you had to spend your little allowance. And then, like you said, look at the album. Oh, that's how I knew who Bones Howe was, producer of Fifth Dimension. Right. And I knew who Neil Sedaka was, and Carole King and Holland Dozier Holland. Tom, I used to think it was Thom Bell, but it was Tom because he spelled his name Thom.
That's right.
So, but I knew these people's names because of reading the credits. And in fact, that's probably the reason I'm a songwriter, because, like I mentioned, I didn't know what a songwriter was. I found out later it was a God-given gift, but I do know what records I liked. So I would get my little 45s and look at, I'd see like, You've Got a Friend, but then I'd see, well, who's Carole King, who's James Taylor? And I remember my dad said, well, those are the songwriters. Mm-hmm. So by reading that, and he added, and they're the ones that make the money. I'm like, Mm-hmm. So I said, I want to be that. Mm-hmm. So it was by reading the credits and the labels and taking the time to study, not handed music on just whatever platform, and then you get 10 seconds, you can go on to the next song. You couldn't just go on to the next song on an 8-track. I like that song on side 2, you'd have to wait for it to come up until you hear the whole album, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's the time I grew up, you know.
I want to ask you this. Because of your upbringing and the music so wide, varied, that you heard and studied, do you feel you're competitive at this time and going forward?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't like to use the word competitive, but I'd say passionate. Yes, I want to, when I wake up, that's maybe what I want to do more than eating is write a song or produce a song or something to do with music. But I guess that's another form of being competitive, is being passionate about it. I'm 65, but that's the time I feel like I'm 15 or 18 is when I'm making music, Mm-hmm. So yes, the answer to that question. Yeah.
Something that Quincy Jones told me one time. He said he felt because he came from jazz, that jazz was so advanced that he could take that wisdom he learned in jazz and he could do anything with music he wanted to do. And I kind of saw him do that when I would go visit him at the LA studio, Ocean Way, whatever it might be. Down by his feet would be Chaka Khan album or whatever was current at that time. But we knew he came from jazz. He was discovered with Lionel Hampton and worked with Ray Charles and all that world. But here he is making music to stomp for Brothers Johnson. Here he is making Off the Wall for Michael Jackson. Here he is doing Patty Austin or whatever you got into, James Ingram. So he showed me that, if you come from a deep background of jazz world, Thom Bell, that classic music, nothing you can't do.
That's very. I'd say Quincy is probably my prototype of, maybe not even consciously, even though I love all of his music from even back in the day, Smackwater Jack and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I admire producers and writers that have a sound and everything they do. Whether what artist it is, it sounds like them. But That's not my style. My style is, hey, if you're going to produce Earth, Wind, and Fire, you produce them the way that they are as an artist, and you bring out the best. You put your thing on it, but it's their record. It says Earth, Wind, and Fire on it. It ain't Preston Glass. So you're not going to go from Earth, Wind, and Fire to Kenny G and then do Kenny G like Earth, Wind, and Fire. You do Kenny G like Kenny G. You do Johnny Mathis like Johnny Mathis. So I learned that each artist, and I think Quincy, that was his thing. He was able to do Frank Sinatra. It sounded like the greatest Frank Sinatra record you can make. But then he'd go to do Michael Jackson at a time when the odds were against Quincy, because they were like, oh, this jazz guy can't do, this old man can't do that. Even Michael was like, do you know of a producer? And he said, me. And Michael's, really?
That's right.
But he showed him.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm making. Okay, I'm going to just hit on a few more things and then we'll wrap it. I want to know what your impression is of Maurice White.
Yes, that's my brother, my mentor, one of the greatest musicians of all time. And, I was just proud to be his friend. He taught me a lot about, songwriting, believe it or not, simplicity. You don't have to be profound in telling a story on your lyric. So when we got in the trenches, we wrote about 50 songs together, believe it or not, over the years, and through that, I got a lot to know about, wow, this is the guy that wrote, all these songs, Shining Star. And it was like, wow. He said simplicity is important to reach the more people you can. And then I saw it when we were in the trenches writing, I might try and come up with something heady, really. And he'd be like, no, make it, simple so everybody can hear it.
Allie Willis did really well with Maurice as well.
Right.
Did you know Allie too?
I did. She was great. I met her a couple of years before she passed.
Anything you want to say about Allie Willis?
Yeah, great spirit, just free spirit too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Great writer. Yeah.
Yes. What's out now that you love? Is there anything out now you love?
Yeah. There's a lot of... What I do like about today's music is it's so wide and varied, and anything goes. It's like it's like a, what do you call it, a oxymoron. On the one hand, it's kind of sad that anybody and their mama, even the guy across the street, he can put out an album today if he wanted to. Back then, you had to get a record deal, and people had to sign you and spend, if they wanted to spend $100,000 or $200,000, whatever. But so anybody can make a record today. But what also is good about today is that anybody could be somebody that normally wouldn't get a chance, but has the talent that is great, and so they put it out, and it might not be number one on the charts, but if you dig for it, you can find it, and you'll learn something from it. So there's a lot of music, not only albums, but songs, but styles of music. I have a song that just was released today. It's in the Afro pop kind of genre, and that genre of music really, I didn't know the first thing about it a couple of years ago, but it was through today's means of being able to access digital platforms and stuff. Like, wow, I like that. And so it inspired me to write something like that. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned me this morning a sad thing of the passing of Dwayne Wiggins. You want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I remember meeting Dwayne. Nice guy, another Bay Area homegrown genius musician. So prayers for his family. Of course, I love his brothers, Raphael, and I love his guitar playing too. Yeah, very unique style. A lot of people can play guitar, but when you have a style that's identifiable, that's really special. And his style to me was identifiable. Yeah.
I did not realize he was sick. I saw a picture of him recently where he looked so regal, like we were talking. I had no idea he was not well.
Yeah.
But he's been a staple here in the Bay Area, powerfully. I remember them poking in on our sessions and being really impressed by the gear and what we were doing with Raphael and their family.
Yeah.
And of course, they were hot with Tony.
Yeah. I'll never forget, because Well, you actually introduced me to Ed Eckstein, who was at the time part of Quincy's company, but then he went on to Wing Polygram, who's the company that signed Tony. So when it came across Ed's desk, he asked me, "What do you think of these guys?" Before he signed them. Mm-hmm. It was almost like, "Do you think I should sign them?" I was like, "These guys are great." I heard the demos and stuff.
Of course. Wow. Ed Eckstein. Say something about Ed Eckstein.
Yeah, Ed's one of my favorite people. He helped my career with his A&Ring of the Kenny G album. And I did a couple other little projects with him, but just as a person, he and his family, the legacy of his family, of course, Billy Eckstein being his father, and I have a lot of respect for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. His brother Guy.
Oh, Guy too as well, drummer. They're real music people.
Yes. Well, that was a great interview now we've done, Press. Anything you want to say in closing to our fans around the world? Anything that's on your heart? Feel free.
Well, music is something that has always got me through good and bad, So no matter what is going on in your lives or going on beyond your lives, keep music in your life, whether it's on a listening tip or if you're a musician, use that as something that will not only get you through the day, but it'll help you bring others to get through their day. And this man has been a great component for the world to be able to get through their days with all the great music he has. So I really appreciate all the music you put out there.
Thanks, Press.
And that's my little 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Love you, man.
I love you, too.
Love you. Thanks for coming back to Tarpan. You were here when we first opened the doors. And that's now we're celebrating. Can you dig this? It's our 40th year anniversary.
Wow.
40 years of Tarpan Studios.
Wow.
We opened in 85, and it's now 2025.
Okay, and Narada's going to give away $400 million for the person that can call in. Here's the number, 555. And name what the name of this studio was before Tarpan.
Oh,
if you can name this,
the
answer to that question, you get $400 million.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening to our All In podcast. If you enjoy the show, please follow, like, and subscribe on our socials. YouTube, Official Narada Instagram, Official Narada, one word. And All In with Narada Michael Walden on Apple Music, Spotify, and more. Thank you so very much.